Very Bad Wizards is a podcast with a philosopher, my dad, and a psychologist, Dave Pizarro, having an informal discussion about issues in science and ethics. Please note that the discussion contains bad words that I'm not allowed to say, and knowing my dad, some very inappropriate jokes.
Why do you think your mommy or daddy are always telling you, don't put that in your mouth? Let's find out.
The David has spoken. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Who are you? Who are you? A very bad man.
I'm a very good man. Good man. They think deep thoughts, and with no more brains than you have. Pay no attention to that man. Anybody can have a brain.
You're a very bad man.
I'm a very good man. Just a very bad wizard.
Welcome to Very Bad Wizards. I'm Tamler Summers from the University of Houston. Dave, the city of Houston, God's chew toy, the squeaky mouse for the kitten. We just got hit by a surprise Derrico a couple of days ago. Do you even know what a Derrico is?
I have no idea. I've never heard that.
I'd never heard it either. And it was fucking crazy and extremely destructive to one of our neighborhoods in particular, like our neighborhood and downtown and a couple neighborhoods west of us. Yeah, like we had heard there was going to be some thunderstorms, maybe heavy rains, kind of normal, par for the course. And then all of a sudden we get this tornado warning. And it comes like 15 minutes before this whole thing happens. And luckily, I was home and I brought in the garbage and the recycling because it was that day. Got Eliza into the house, didn't have time to get the camping supplies. And then all of a sudden, the fucking most insane storm I've ever been in comes through. So a Derrico is like a tornado, but it's bigger and the winds are straight ahead instead of swirly. So you just get 110 mile an hour winds just coursing through this parts of the city and just fucking it up. Our neighborhood is fucked up right now. And I know friends who a tree fell through their house. We got lucky for the most part. We have a little damage, but for the most part, we are hugely lucky. And we're also hugely lucky to have power because, which we got back the following morning. A lot of people still don't have it. And they're not giving encouraging signs on when. So it is crazy.
I didn't think we were going to be able to record. Okay, a couple things. Hold on. First of all, is that how people say it? Derrico?
Don't know. I've only read it.
Okay, because it's derecho, which is the Spanish word for straight.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's not to say that it's not pronounced there, Derrico, but I was like, derecho. Yeah.
That's helpful. Good.
You like how that's I'm not how are you? How is everybody? I'm you're pronouncing it wrong.
Maybe you are. I've never heard the word before, but yeah,
I certainly haven't. So did you get a phone alert?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Both my daughter and I, we were home. My wife was at work and she was downtown. So she had to deal with a whole school, ballet schools of people that she has to get down into the Houston Ballet.
So the wind would pick up their tutus.
Yeah.
They would just go flying.
Be like Marilyn Monroe and the 7-Year Itch.
So
no, she runs the Houston Ballet Academy, so she had to get everybody down into whatever safe space that they have. We just huddled in our hallway with Trixie.
Did the message say what to do? Go to your basement, and you're I don't have a fucking basement.
Nobody has a basement in Houston. It would just be immediately flooded. So
just get away from the windows and shit. Right?
Yeah, we stayed away from the windows. But it was like being in a some kind of post-apocalyptic movie while it's happening. We've been through hurricanes, we've been through a lot, and I've never been through anything like this. Never been a part of winds like that. And you would just hear explosions and then things falling, and then our street was kind of decimated. Trees are down everywhere. And
I know you sent me a picture of like what appeared to be just the top half of a tree
Just
wrapped
on
around
a power line.
Like
Yeah.
on a power line.
that
like
whole
not that
area
the
is
power
fucked up.
line
That's
fell
like a half a
and
block
wrapped
from my house. Yeah, I know.
Right.
It's like Dorothy's fucking house just get trapped on a power line.
That's why I said if you died in a tornado, I would sample it. I would sample your screaming tornado death and add it to our opening song.
Oh, you would? That's right. Yeah, that's actually a very fitting way for me to die. And it almost happened. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, it's fucked up. Like also like 5 people died. Yeah, it's like Houston really is right now we have biblical weather these last 8 or 9 years.
Yeah, it's like the ending of A Serious Man. Like this is what happened at the end.
Yeah.
You know? Like we didn't see it, but that's
right. Like, yeah, soon it'll be just the ending of Magnolia, and we're gonna get frogs from the sky, and we'll all just be screaming at our pharmacists.
Shit. I'm glad you're okay.
Yeah.
Except for those 5 people.
We got lucky. I have lots of friends who got much less lucky. So yeah,
Crazy.
We'll see. Trixie is like, this is bullshit. Get me the fuck back to the SPCA.
This could.
Like I can't live here. It's like I hope they were okay.
She's just going and eating all the chocolate, like trying to end it.
So, what are we doing today? We have a packed show, a kind of traditional throwback show, maybe.
Oh, yeah, it's full of like empirical findings.
Yeah.
Lots
of findings, but a little culture war stuff in the beginning.
Yeah.
Just to, for those people.
Right. So for the main segment, we're talking about an article recently published in Nature Communications on rice farmers and wheat farmers and the question of the origins of collectivism and individualism.
Yeah, like are rice farmers more collectivistic than wheat farmers? And is the fact that they're rice farmers, is that why they are more collectivistic?
Yeah, like the origins of culture, like big questions.
Big questions. Questions that, I used to work on back in the day. So, yeah, but first, we have a paper that's also published in it's a real journal, right? Like
it's a good journal. Yeah.
Good journal.
Perspectives on Psychological Science.
Taboos and Self-Censorship Among U.S. Psychology Professors. So this is a paper by Corey Clark, and then a lot of other et al. Yeah.
It's a who's who of, what do we call?
On the kind of IDW adjacent.
I'd say it's people from a wide range of what you'd call centrist to like kind of reactionary.
Yeah, something like that. So you have like Jeffrey Miller, Baumeister, Weingard.
Yeah, and my friends here at Cornell, Steve Ceci and Wendy Williams, Phil Tetlock.
The paper that will go through a bunch of taboo conclusions that people can draw if they're studying psychology and assess to the degree to which A, people believe in these taboo conclusions, and then B, if they do, to what extent they self-censor, to what extent they think censoring others is okay, to what extent that influences how they engage with the profession. It's a funny paper. It reads quite reasonably,
Yeah.
If there are some borderline reactionary people on there based on their kind of public personas, it doesn't come across in the paper, I don't think, at least on one level. You could take like a more esoteric reading, like a more dog whistly reading. And there are times where it kind of feels like you should have subtitles for this, like in Annie Hall, Here's where we're getting to race science and why the real research is being suppressed or something.
Right.
But it would be very hard to like pin it down anywhere for that. It's it may not, and that may be completely unfair, but it is. That did jump out at me that there is a kind of other level to read this otherwise seemingly reasonable, if a little boring paper on this topic that, doesn't say anything that's surprising in the least.
Yeah, no, my belief is that the group of authors that are sort of less reactionary had a say in how this gets written up and discussed.
So the others just had to be content with their little signs, planting little signs that will let their Straussian readers...
Like a watermark of Pepe the Frog.
If you look at the letters on page 3, you can make out Pepe the Frog.
What they did was they interviewed 40 people on Zoom, like a qualitative interview to talk about this stuff. And then based on those, they created a survey and then asked 470 psych professors. But I was one of the 41. So I sat and had a long conversation with Corey about this stuff, which was good. But I didn't take the survey.
Well, that would have been compromised, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Given that
I know the answers. Yeah.
You know what's true and what's false.
Exactly.
So they talk about the issue here, right? So it says on page 3 here, a primary goal of science is to pursue an empirically accurate description of the natural world. And nature does not always conform to human social values and desires. True enough, right?
Yes.
Indeed, the claim that humans strive to climb status hierarchies, as among scientists, is likely true. Clark and Weingard citing themselves here. But it is not a particularly flattering view of human nature. A scholar speaking the truth, or at least what he or she sincerely believes to be true on the basis of the evidence, may occasionally offend some or even most people. But, the idea is if you're engaged in a fact-finding mission, a disinterested quest for the truth, that's not something you can expect the world to conform to whatever kind of the woke trends are in this latest iteration.
What if you were like a true idealist and you just thought that in fact nature did conform?
Yeah, like a Talon, like a Talon philosopher, yeah, it absolutely does. Like if we persuade people. When we get to the conclusions though, it's very hard for many, if not most of them, to determine what's so taboo about them, but I guess we'll get to that. So I guess, that's fine. It's obviously a lot more complicated in terms of, given that a lot of these reports are likely to be false, it's not about if this is true, we have to keep it under wraps,
right.
Saul Smolanski thinks about free will skepticism or something like that,
Right.
It's more okay, this is kind of bullshit anyway, this whole way you're going about measuring things. So if you're going to then use that method and come up with a conclusion that could be considered racist or transphobic or whatever, maybe we're going to be a little harder on that stuff.
I don't agree that our measures are always bullshit, but sure, I get your point. Yeah.
But you get my point.
I just resist your subtle digs that my silence would somehow sound like agreement.
Complicity, yeah,
Exactly.
agreement, yeah. So you could debate whether that's even appropriate, but I do think that's what we're talking about here. At least in large part. The one thing I did want to ask you, so they have as a kind of a motivating thing that nature, human behavior, and also nature communications have changed publication guidelines indicating that papers may be rejected and even retracted on the basis of harm concerns surrounding research conclusions. Is that true?
They did change their guidelines. So they published an editorial, I think, in 2022. And I believe that they are claiming that they could reject or retract. But when you read the changes that they made, it just sounds like the regular kind of woke shit. They're just okay, we already know that we don't want to publish any research where humans were harmed, right? We're not letting people actually shock or, we can't do those kinds of things anymore.
Milgram stuff.
But we also are broadening our conception of harm to include the fact that some group members could be let me actually read it. So content that is premised upon the assumption of inherent biological, social, or cultural superiority or inferiority of one human group over another based on race, ethnicity, national or social origin, sex, gender identity, et cetera, et cetera. They say editors reserve the right to request modifications to or correct or otherwise amend post-publication and in severe cases refuse publication of or retract post-publication. Content that undermines or could reasonably be perceived to undermine the rights and dignities of an individual or human group on the basis of socially constructed or socially relevant human groupings. Content that includes text or images that directly or indirectly disparages a person or group on the basis of socially relevant groupings. And the last one, submissions that embody singular privileged perspectives, which are exclusionary of a diversity of voices in relation to socially constructed or socially relevant human groupings. This stuff, I was a little bit pissed when they published this, but it could be super milk toasty. It sounds just broad enough that it just depends, I guess, on how you interpret what's found.
It's an interesting justification that I never thought of before, which is, look, we already do this with IRBs, right? So, we already don't allow all sorts of things that might shed light on the human mind, but would be unethical. to perform on participants. So like this isn't that different in kind from that. You know, we're already
Right.
not engaged in a completely unconditional search for the truth.
Right. If you have a question that is like, you know, how long can you shock somebody before they start developing mental illness? Like,
Right.
People would be like, well, you just can't ask that. So yeah, you're right. I hadn't actually thought of it really in that way. So I guess the objection is that this could be used to like not publish something that says, you can imagine saying, oh, cognitive decline occurs even earlier than we thought. Like by the time people are 55, their short-term memory is such that they couldn't hold down a real job, and that could have implications. And so they might say like,
as someone who's approaching that age, like I think it's definitely true.
right. And so I don't know how much they've exercised any of this.
Yeah, it's always a question of, you know, it's like, are you opening the door for ideological capture or whatever? And I think, you know, here it'll depend how you think about all of this, dependent on the details of what we're talking about, what they've actually done versus what they're published as saying that they're going to do, and what exactly the things that they're worried about people are either going to censor or self-censor their beliefs. So should we go through those? Do you have any things to say about how they set up the experiment?
No, I don't think so. I mean, they constructed a survey. I guess it's good to know how they're doing it. So people got a series of these taboo conclusions, and they were asked to, with a little sliding scale, ranging from 0 to 100, how confident are you in the truth or falsity of this statement? So from 100% confident it's false to 100% confident it's true.
And they got like people who put hundreds for all of the questions, which is kind of remarkable.
Did they say that like for real?
Yeah, I thought so.
There definitely are people who put 100 in every one.
I couldn't tell if it was 100 for all of them, but I thought it was. But I didn't know if it's 100 for both sides or not.
Maybe we can, when we read the statements, we can talk about whether this was phrased in the best way, because the combination of the statements and what they're asked to rate, I think, leads to some real weird ambiguity.
Yeah, because then they're also asked to rate a bunch of different things about how comfortable they would feel expressing their beliefs and
exactly
what should happen to people who express those beliefs or who publish findings trying to support those beliefs. So let's go through the questions, and then we can, because honestly, this is where I have the most to say.
Are you going to answer?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I will. The first one is tendency to engage in sexually coercive behavior likely evolved because it conferred some evolutionary advantages on men who engaged in such behavior. I don't know. Just because, I doubt there's a fully fleshed out theory of this. I would put this at what's the 0% means you're 100% sure it's false?
When you're taking it, you see 100% true on one side and 100% false on the other side.
Anyway, I'd put this at 20% disbelief, but, don't
20%
know.
disbelief.
Yeah. What about you?
Well, here's where I already start to get into issues, and I don't think I'm being pedantic, but you tell me, when they say the tendency to engage in sexually coercive behavior, so you're basically saying rapiness or whatever, right? Like sexual, likely evolved. I think that some of it likely evolved. So I think that there are reasons why men are more violent in general. What they're really trying to ask here is it that men who raped were more likely to reproduce and have offspring who raped?
That was a low status strategy for males. The males who couldn't actually get the women to engage in consensual sex still needed, their DNA needed them to replicate. And so they would engage in the plan B, the rapey strategy.
Conceptually, involuntary celibate is not a category that they held in their head.
Right.
So I believe that could be a plausible piece of the puzzle, but I think that there's maybe general tendencies to be violent that evolved, and then there's also cultural reasons that men engage in that kind of aggression. And so what do I say if I believe that some small piece of the puzzle is I'm actually
totally.
pretty sure.
Right.
Yeah, right?
So you could put 80% for this.
Yeah. And it makes it sound like I'm that what I'm saying is that it is the most like exhaustive explanation or something like that. But I'm not, right? I'm just
Right.
really confident that some small piece.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So, yeah, is that pedantic? No.
I mean, I would-
on one level,
it's
absolutely
ambiguous.
not. You're totally right. Like, if you interpret it that way, then I think like the most reasonable answer is probably that you're 70 or 80% kind of towards that side, based on what we understand about all of our evolved tendencies, or
Right.
just tendencies. Period. Probably have some connection to how we evolved. But
Yeah.
like, what got me thinking about this was not just the inherent ambiguity, but why this is considered a taboo conclusion. Like, why is this such a politically polarizing question?
Yeah.
Right? Like, it sometimes seems like an issue just gets almost randomly, it gets pulled into the like political battles of the time. And like, it's just not clear. Like, why, if you put 80 or 90% that yes, this was 250,000 years ago in the African savannah, like an evolutionary strategy, like why would that be something that people would be all like hot and bothered about, no matter how it turns out? Like it is funny to see like there's certain things like this, and I have like we've probably talked about like why this is, but like why do you think this one is politically charged in any way?
There's a sociological answer that is not, it's only like the proximal one, which is that a few years ago, like 20 years ago now, some evolutionary psychologists, no, actually biologists and anthropologists wrote a book called A Natural History of Rape, basically saying as much, right?
Yeah.
And they went to great lengths to say, we're not saying in any way that this justifies rape, which is weird that you even have to say that, right?
Right. That's the question. Why would you feel like you would have to say that for that more than we live in a rape culture that warps like young men's minds?
Yeah.
Like that doesn't justify rape.
I think it boils down to your old area of interest, which is people read that as people who engage in rape. It was biologically determined in a way that we have no control over.
We can't
and so we have to
blame them.
blame them less. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's just such a bizarre thing if you think about it. Just like you don't have to think about it that reflectively, it's just nobody's saying that you're determined. There are plenty of low status males, if that's the theory they're working on, that don't rape people. And there's no reason to think that if this was culturally influenced, we would have more control over our behavior than if, I think it really is, though, that they think like you're excusing sexual assault, right? Like you're saying it's okay. Like rapists have this ironclad excuse now,
Yeah. I almost think what might be going on is that the people who criticize it on the grounds that other people might interpret it that way, even though they themselves know not. And so there is this like weird meta level of like, I just want to make sure nobody, uses this as their Twinkie defense. Like, you can't help it.
Your Honor, you don't understand. Like back in the Pleistocene era, low status males may have sexually assaulted women as part of an evolutionary strategy.
Right.
So like rapey Ricardo here, he couldn't help himself.
Rapey Ricardo. That sounds so anti-Hispanic. Just because a derecho blew through your city doesn't mean you have to like take it out on all
It was
of us.
more a Ricky Ricardo reference, I think, even if I could interrogate my head. But yeah, like, again, like, I just don't get it. Like, it seems like if you were arguing that this is a deeply misogynistic society that, like, makes young men who aren't getting women into powder kegs of sexual violence, it's like, that seems like that should excuse that person more than what happened 250,000 years ago. If you really think like this culture is turning these people into it, but it's like, oh no, if that's true, then they're also still fully responsible for doing it. Whereas, if it's something that happened hundreds of thousands of years ago that we're just speculating like could have like been adaptive, then they're completely off the hook. It's just a bizarre way of thinking. If you really just think about it for a second.
And then I think that you start developing heuristics that are knee-jerk responses to evolutionary psychology studies that make any claims about this stuff, when they can honestly be criticized on so many grounds that don't require you to make a moral argument.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Should we move on to the next one?
Yeah. Number 2, gender biases are not the most important drivers of the underrepresentation of women in STEM fields.
All right. Before I give my number, how do you interpret this? Like,
it's so weird, yeah.
The gender biases of like search committees, the gender biases of like people in the field, or just gender biases in the world and the culture? Like in America.
You're right to point out, it's going to come up again, I
Yes.
think, this kind of question.
Yep.
I interpret this as, little girls are told, Barbie says that they hate math, right? That this is how I interpret this. As well as hiring committees, but I read it at least as the claim that like biologically, and in a lot of these, I wish they would just say biologically rather than phrase it in the opposite way, right? Like gender biases are not the most important drivers.
It's also like gender biases makes it seem like people are, I don't know, being biased in the moment rather than some deeply ingrained aspect of a particular culture. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I would refer to that as discrimination because I really do think that these are like young women are discouraged from doing math or whatever. But this is a huge problem.
Well, they're not
so
good
here's
at
what I wanted to ask. Like, I know that the opposite of gender bias as an explanation isn't only biological forces or whatever, biological like differences. Yeah. But I think that they are treating it as opposite. And so it would just read more clearly if they said, agree. How much do you agree or disagree that biology is the most important driver of the underrepresentation of women in STEM? So like my sense is that if they wrote the statements that way, they themselves sound a little bit like
they're self-censoring.
They're right
by how they're phrasing it. Yeah, because it's really like I don't love the way of phrasing. So if you're talking about is this shaped in part by deeply ingrained cultural, in conjunction with some biological influences. Yes. Right. But like, I don't like to reduce all that to biases for reasons that we've fought about quite bitterly at times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Our worst fights. Yes. And what bothers me even like above and beyond that in this one is not the most important drivers. So what does important mean? Right. Like, cause now we've gone from making a scientific claim to like one of like something can be caused by bias. Only 10% of the effects could be caused by bias, but I think that they are the most important, sources of.
I interpreted that as just influence. Like the most important is the one that has the most influence.
Yeah, right. Like that explains the most variance.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would put probably like, this is one where I just like, it's not helpful for me to answer it because like, I kind of reject the whole framing of this question.
Yeah.
But I also think, smuggled in there's so much objectionable about it is the idea that like STEM fields are so obviously superior that if women like choose not to do it, they're being discriminated, it's a bias against them. Maybe they're smart. Maybe they want to go into humanities because like that's like the better field and it's like the other way and the biases are the other way. So like poor guys are getting like pressured by like the patriarchy to take shitty finance and like engineering jobs, like soul sucking, like oil and gas jobs.
How did finance become STEM?
It is math.
Yeah, it's math. Yeah, I mean, implicit in this is that it is a bad thing that they're underrepresented, but I don't know that there's that much more to it. I think it's more saying something about you.
Yeah, I'm with the women.
You're with the women who all choose not to get jobs.
Who choose not to get interviews and to get lower teaching evaluations just because they're women.
Again, this actually just confuses me too because
the
phrasing. Gender biases are not the most important driver. Am I supposed to be confident that it's false? Now I have like a bunch of negatives that I have to like undo in my head. Like I'm like, what?
I'm discarding that question. Like, all right. I feel like that's a manipulation check. If you answer that question, then you haven't really thought about this enough.
I went through all of these with Bella before we recorded, and it was nice to hear her get really frustrated in the phrasing of these. She's like, I just won't answer that. Like I would.
Yeah, good. All right, number 3. Same issue here, and also confusing in terms of, I guess to say this is false is the taboo conclusion. Academia discriminates against Black people, e.g. in hiring, promotion, grants, invitations to participate in colloquia, symposia.
Yeah.
It's also such a sweeping statement. Academia does this,
Right.
And when, like, are we talking about? Are we talking about, like, right now? Or are we talking about, like, throughout, like, the history of higher education where it's undeniably true that, like, a lot of people were shut out of pursuing these kinds of opportunities? So, I don't know. But I guess if it's taboo, we're supposed to say, no, academia doesn't discriminate. Is that the idea?
That's the taboo one, if you agree that it doesn't discriminate. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to say something about like who the audience is here. Like these are all people who are in academia. So we all know the many efforts that are made to actually hire, promote, and invite Black participants at our institutions. And we're doing that because we have a real belief that that's something that needs to be done. So the answer seems so much to be both of these things.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
some
right.
Black academics that I know get invited to give talks like every week of their calendar year, right? And it's all because people have this belief.
Yeah. So in one sense, the answer then is no.
Exactly.
In fact, it's us. It's the fucking white guys that can't get these opportunities.
Yeah,
And we're getting a
it
little
is.
angry about it, frankly. That we're a little bitter. We're a little,
Yeah.
we might have to start a little backlash.
Right. And also what you said about higher education historically, but also this is, I guess, purposefully excluding the discrimination that occurs earlier on that might discourage people to go into academia.
And then it's like 100% the other way. Like, I think
Exactly.
there's all sorts of subtle ways in which we discourage. And the fact that they don't see that many Black professors teaching, like there's all sorts of ways in which that's definitely true, even if you think a lot of departments are trying to remedy this and actually taking active steps. Now, whether that's true down the line, like across all universities, but certainly in a lot of universities, that's happening.
Right.
All right.
Yeah. Number 4.
Yeah.
Biological sex is binary for the vast majority of people. Now, is this really taboo to agree with?
I know.
Because even the people who I know who are hardcore of the belief that like sex isn't binary would also agree that it is for the vast majority of people, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Like, I think we're going to be a test case here. Whether, we'll see if we should have self-censored.
Yeah. Also self-center.
Self-censor, yes. But yeah, like that just seems, and especially that they say like biological sex. Yeah, that doesn't seem to me to be controversial at all. So we await our cancellation. Like we can go on Bill Maher. He can be all like,
oh, did you see that Bill Burr?
I did. And it was like, it was good, but like I kind of expected more from it than based on what everyone was saying about it than it actually is. But I saw
it without any prejudices. And it was great because Bill Burr I like him. I think he's clever. He's never been my favorite.
Your guy,
but I think but I think he was fucking amazing.
I obviously love Bill Burr. I've seen him a bunch of times. He's a Boston guy. So, because he really does walk the line so perfectly, both like in terms of everyone just knows his heart is in the right place. So he can get away with saying a lot of things that other people can't, but also he just has the right opinion about this, which is stop bitching about like everybody's hypersensitivities, and also you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. For people like Bill Maher.
And one thing that Bill Burr has that's amazing is his ability to quickly find the most vulnerable part of the person he's attacking and like bring them down. Right. Like by the end of the like whatever 3-minute thing, like Bill Maher seemed like he shouldn't have a career.
No, I know. It was
that's such a good skill, you find that and just go for the jugular. And
it was like Ja Rule after like
exactly.
He does. And that he learned that at the like comics table at the Comedy Cellar, getting Patrice O'Neill to just like destroy everybody's life.
One of the only people who go toe to toe with any single person.
Okay. I guess we should go through more quickly because I think a lot of my other complaints about these are...
there's some... We don't want to be too boring by saying like the question was phrased wrong, even though that's my conclusion for all of these.
The social sciences in the United States discriminates against conservatives, e.g. in hiring, promotion, grants, invitations to participate in colloquia/symposia. This is an interesting one because discriminate is a tricky word here, There's a certain kind of conservative that can be a bit of a pain in the ass about the fact that they're conservative, and not because they're bad people necessarily, but just because they're of a certain age and a certain sensibility. And I bet that those people in a kind of self-perpetuating cycle make themselves less and less welcome over the years because people are typically a little more liberal and less apt to share their point of view. So, yeah.
I also think that what is true is that liberal professors assume a room full of liberals, and when they're teaching will constantly make disparaging remarks about conservative points of view in a way that if you were, just some like 18-year-old kid who was raised in a conservative household, I'm sure you would feel like you were sort of not welcome to have the views that you had.
I think maybe some professors do that, but I don't think that's the norm.
I'm not even talking about academic topics. I'm talking about like just joking about like the idiot Republicans.
Right.
And I don't know like proportion of people who do it. Like I would hope that most don't, but I do. I have seen it happen and been like,
yeah, it's ugly.
Shit. Yeah. And then there's all kinds of stuff that might be correlated with conservatism that people might think, well, if he's religious, he might not be a good scientist. Like that kind of discrimination, I'm sure exists. And in fact, it almost prevented me from getting my job when one of the committee members found out that I had been raised Seventh-day Adventist and went to Seventh-day Adventist college. They almost put the kibosh on hiring me. I think they would have been against the law, but they told me years later.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I only found out like 2 years into the podcast. I never would have started a podcast with a former 7-day Adventist. But then once we had started, I was like, all right, and you haven't been that bad either. Like, I've learned something today.
Thank you. All right. Racial biases are not the most important drivers of higher crime rates among Black Americans relative to white Americans. Again, the use of the are not just to avoid saying either Black culture or Black biology.
Well, this is where I think like the biases might not be the most important factor, but like here's where I think biases, like it is a problematic word, because if you're talking about like racist structural and institutional factors, which is normally separate from biases, which is like we're being biased against you in person right now because of our implicit or explicit racism, you might think, well, that's there, but it's not nearly as important as these structural and institutional factors that are also racist. So it's just like a dumb question then. Like I think like I would say probably like, 90%, whichever is that they're not the most important driver.
I mean, the biggest flaw in this is that the scale is a scale of confidence in the claim, and the claims can be interpreted in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Give us a more specific claim and ask us what we believe it to be.
Okay, number 7, men and women have different psychological characteristics because of evolution. Is that controversial?
I mean, yeah, for some people, but I think for the vast majority of people,
that seems
it's
like
not.
A straw
And again,
man.
what the question is secretly trying to get at is the view that anything that might be, say, like a social or economic inequality is a result of biological evolution causing women's psychology to be different. Again, like there's all this like stuff that you're supposed to read into these.
Because otherwise the questions are just like naturally like, well, what do you mean? Like you want to clarify certain ideas and try to pin it down in ways that might not even be possible. But like, you're right. You have to interpret this in a way that's already been kind of defined by the culture wars to some extent. If you're even just to like figure out what it is they're asking.
Yeah. So I do think like that there are different psychological characteristics because of evolution. I just think that they're small enough as to not matter that much.
I think they're small enough to not matter that much, but not small enough that you should make your daughter like play with Tarzans and only take a robotics after school program.
Well, wouldn't you want to make up for biology?
No, because I don't necessarily think one is superior than the other because I'm not a sexist. So the 8th one here now, like if you're listening to this with a dog in the room, watch your dog's behavior. Genetic differences explain non-trivial 10% or more variance in race differences in intelligence test scores. Is this whole paper really about this one question?
they embedded a bunch of like foils to get at this.
Exactly.
Yeah, it might be. To this, I would just say I laid out my position about this in a 2-part episode.
Yeah.
But the like TLDR is that I don't think the question makes that much sense to begin with.
Unless you interpret it in a certain way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would also refer people to what Dave said in that episode.
For once we agree.
Yeah. I guess 9 is also one that this could be about. 8 and 9. Makes sense. You kind of bury them in towards the end. Transgender identity is sometimes the product of social influence. Like, again, like sometimes, like, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, clearly. Like, I know people that's been true of.
Again, talking to my daughter, who is like as
wokest.
liberal as you can get, right? Here, growing up in Ithaca, where like I heard somebody say that in her child's elementary school class, like 50% of the kids or more are identifying as non-binary.
Yeah.
And non-binary counts as transgender for most people. And
they're not.
I don't think that something has all of a sudden happened that 9-year-olds are like more likely to admit to their biological inclinations of being not binary.
So again, it's like you have to almost read into this as, oh, you have to take the fully woke position on this, which is it's not ever social influence. It's always just this is how you feel and have always felt. And that's just unrealistic and implausible. And I don't think any like reasonable person would disagree that that's true to some extent. Especially sometimes is such a Weasley word. Okay, last one.
Yeah, exactly.
Democratic diversity.
Demographic
diversity, race, gender in the workplace often leads to worse performance.
This is another case where, okay, what they really want to say is that there is research claiming to show that diversity improves performance.
Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of times you will hear like people like HR will say shit like, and really research has shown that if we champion diversity, our outcomes will be better, which by the way is the most fucked up reason to value diversity. Like it's such a capitalist reason to like, by the way, if you hire at least 2 black people on your team, you will actually increase the profits of your company.
And your H index will benefit.
And so phrasing it in this way seems like.
But this one, I'd straightforwardly disagree. Like, I don't know what they mean by often, but I would take it as more than half the time. And I don't think that's true.
Yeah. The word often seemed weird there.
Yeah.
Like, why is this? Some of these are sometimes, some of these are often, some of these are important, some of these are, I just don't.
Unlike a lot of the other ones, like this one, I think there's a straightforward reading of it that I would just say, no, I disagree.
Yeah.
I guess like, they do find some self-censorship, but if you really don't know what people think they're attesting to in the first place, it's hard to interpret all of these results. So I don't have that much to say about their findings, which are fairly modest, I think, but
they're what you'd expect for a lot of these. So like if we go to just how confident are you that these are true, the averages are so close to, I'm neither confident in their truth nor confident in their falsehood, but the standard deviations are huge. So this is just what they're capturing is that like probably half of their sample was like super anti-woke and half of their sample was super woke.
Yeah. And then they say there's a couple of possible causes for why they're self-censoring and more supportive of censoring. One is that they overinflate the fears of expressing these opinions, which I think, like if I had to guess, like with a lot of money, I would put it on that one, that because this is such a focus in a lot of the media outlets that these people are likely to visit, they are convinced that they are a persecuted minority right now who believes that like there are some biological differences between men and women. But they also say, but maybe there really is a kind of punitive culture out there, which of course is true to some extent, like I think we've passed the peak of it, but it's always been a little undercurrent there. And so, again, fully reasonable in terms of how they present it. At the end, it's just the questions they're vague enough that it's really hard to know like what to make of any of this.
Yeah, maybe the fairest reading is that knee-jerk saying no or knee-jerk saying yes, like, true or false, is just a sign that you've been too caught up in like the culture war.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Right. And like the perfect way to respond, like where you're not too woke, but you're also not a secret racist or, like a TERF, is how we responded to
it.
That is, then you're kind of perfect. Yeah. Perfectly calibrated. So just do that, people, and you'll be fine in academia and elsewhere.
Good conclusion.
All right. We'll be right back to talk about more cultural differences, more interesting cultural differences.
Welcome back to Very Bad Wizards. This is the predictable time of the episode where we like to take a moment and thank everybody for all of the support that you give us, you, dear listener. One of the ways in which we really feel supported is through interaction, through receiving your messages. You can reach out to us by emailing us at verybadwizards@gmail.com. Against our better judgment, or at least my better judgment, we're also still on Twitter. You can tweet at Tamler, at Peas, or at verybadwizards. You can join the community and get in arguments, discussions with some fellow listeners at Reddit by going to reddit.com/r/verybadwizards. You can give us a follow on Instagram and rate us on Apple Podcasts, and maybe even if you find it in you, leave us a review. You can also listen or subscribe to us on Spotify. We appreciate all of that. And if you want to support us in the more tangible ways, as you know, probably, unless this is the first episode you're hearing about this, that we've gone completely ad-free, and we don't plan on introducing ads in the future. So this support really means a lot to us. You can give us a one-time donation via PayPal. You can buy some swag, t-shirts, mugs. That helps. And you can join our Patreon community. We have a nice, thriving community. We've gotten a lot of nice messages, even a lot of messages saying that you signed up on Patreon just because of our decision to go ad-free. So if you're on the fence, we appreciate that. You can join at the $1 and up per episode tier. As always, you'll get the ad-free episodes. That's no longer a perk because everybody gets that. But you'll get access to the compilations of beats that I put together. But I think the real perks start at the $2 per episode and up, only $4 a month. You get access to all of our bonus content. That is years now of a back catalog of discussions on various movies, TV shows, TV episodes, a whole separate podcast on Deadwood where we go episode by episode in detail, have a discussion about it. All of that you can unlock at the $2 per episode and up tier. At the $5 per episode and up tier, you get to vote on an episode topic. We have those a couple of times a year. You also get access to our 5-part Brothers Karamazov standalone series. You get access to a few videos that Tamler and I have done, lecture videos. And finally, at the $10 per episode and up tier, you get to ask us anything. You get to, once a month, submit a question. We answer all questions. You get to watch us answer these questions in an unedited, long-winded video, although sometimes the questions themselves are long-winded. So it's not just us. You get all that at the $10 and up tier. But if you are at the $2 and up tier, you also get to hear those questions, and the audio version of that will appear in your feed. So once again, just really want to take a moment to thank everybody for the support. We've gotten a lot of nice messages of people telling us nice things about having gone ad-free, and we really appreciate that. We hope that you as the listener can enjoy it, whether or not you contribute via Patreon or email us or anything like that. We strive to give you the best quality, dirty podcast on philosophy and psychology that we can. So thank you. Now let's get to talking about cultural differences in collectivism, individualism, really kind of the origin of culture in general. In this recent paper in Nature Communications called People Quasi-Randomly Assigned to Farm Rice Are More Collectivistic Than People Assigned to Farm Wheat by Thomas Talhelm and Xiaowei Dong. Okay, here's just a little bit of background, I guess. For a long time, I'd say like the biggest part of cultural psychology within social psychology has been focused a lot on this one dimension of collectivism versus individualism. Like you have that sense too, right?
Yeah,
Like,
definitely. Like I looked at this research for my book, Relative Justice, and it was extremely helpful.
Yeah. And there's a lot of reason for that. One dumb reason is that we had easy access to an East Asian population in American universities. So we could pump out a bunch of work showing sort of that this difference exists and what it consists of. And so people have cataloged like over the last, 20, 30 years, a whole bunch of differences between the East and West culture and cognition. And this dimension of individualism is associated with increases in analytic thinking that is typical of Western culture, whereas East Asian culture is more collectivistic, more holistic, and more interdependent. And that, I think, is well documented enough. You might have thoughts about that. But assuming that that general thing is true, that this finding is true, the question as to why this exists, like why these differences exist, hasn't really been well explained. And there have been a few explanations that have been proposed to try to explain this difference. One is just genetics. So some people have proposed that, there's something just in the genes of East Asian versus Western people that gives rise to this different style of thinking, and that might then lead to this different kind of culture. I don't think there's much good evidence for that. But another one, a very popular one, is that modernization just sort of shifted the West toward individualism. But so there are issues with that modernization view. There are a lot of exceptions. Modernization occurred in places like Japan and Korea and Hong Kong just as much as it occurred in the West. But those cultures, nonetheless, are quite collectivistic, and they fit the pattern of collectivistic, holistic, interdependent. In this paper, Thomas Talhelm, who first proposed this theory back in 2014, argues, he offers I think a pretty elegant attempt at an explanation for why these differences exist to begin with. And he says there is a fundamental difference in the kind of agricultural practices that are involved with rice farming versus wheat farming. And because of that, geographical regions that relied a lot on rice farming ended up becoming much more interdependent, collectivistic, and that worked its way into culture and cognition.
Yeah.
And the reason is that rice farming just requires a lot more work. So by his estimate, double the amount of labor. One of the reasons is because you need irrigation and you need to flood the rice paddies, and that requires a lot of cooperation. So cultures that emerged in areas where that was the primary source of agriculture, he and his colleagues argue, would have become more collectivistic. And he originally showed this evidence by looking at geographical regions in China that traditionally had wheat farming versus rice farming, and showed that this difference did emerge. But that's all correlational. So this is an attempt at giving some quasi-experimental evidence, try to test it causally.
And as a kind of contrasting position, as a lead-in, this reminded me a lot of the literature on honor cultures versus non-honor cultures, which also had a kind of agricultural versus herding kind of explanation for it, right? So the idea was that people in herding cultures, because their wealth and their livelihood was more precarious because it was all focused on protecting their herd of animals that they owned, and people would frequently raid and try to steal their property. So they had to send a message that was going to cost you if you try to steal our goats and cows or whatever. So, well, I guess more goats if you try to steal our goats. When I was in Sardinia a couple of years ago, like there's still like a lot of studying of the kind of goat herder honor culture there, and a very famous researcher that worked on this, right? But what's interesting about that theory, which I think is very much in line with the kind of gene culture coevolution Joe Henrich theory, which is we're genetically have a capacity to transmit norms and to reinforce norms and punish norm violators, but they're not that much more specific than that. And so your environment will then shape what your norms are. And in honor culture, there had to be a norm for you can't fuck with us. We can't demonstrate weakness. We always have to stick up for our own, and we always have to send deterrent messages that you just didn't need to do if you were in a more agricultural kind of culture, because stealing and raiding somebody's farm and crops can only get you so far.
I took one of your corn.
Right. I got an apple and like a whole bushel of strawberries. So you're done. Your whole family is done. No, you have to do like the fucked up things like steal their water, you know? But that requires a whole other suite of norms. So what's interesting is that the way that theory works is also meant to explain people in the American Southeast who are supposedly descendants of Scots, Irish, herding cultures, and so have kind of inherited their norms, even though they're no longer herders. You know, like those norms aren't necessarily adaptive for their current environment. It's just something that you inherit as part of your culture. But what this is suggesting is the environment works a lot more immediately to shape these norms than what the kind of leading honor culture theories suggest. So that's what's very interesting about this is you had these people in the 50s who had the same cultural or, you know, like similar cultural backgrounds that were just randomly assigned by the Chinese government after World War II to either be wheat farmers or rice farmers. And so you're talking about a set of norms developing in a very short amount of time that don't necessarily have any relation to what their descendants 200 years ago had, you know, those norms. You see what I'm saying? Like the difference between those things. So the effect of your environment would be much more immediate if this finding is true. Yeah.
Although, you know, the culture of honor stuff doesn't make a claim about how long it took to develop those norms, because I think it's still possible that the norms develop quickly. They're just slow to go away, which is something that this paper also
that's
argues,
true.
right?
That's a good point. Yeah, that's right. So it could be that you develop it quickly and then you keep them like where, no matter what your like new environment is. Yeah.
But even as you say it, like I would have thought that this is like a very slow process.
Yeah.
Because hundreds of years of culture is developing. But yeah, culture can be an adaptation.
But if the wheat farmers, if you're already talking about a Chinese culture that bends towards collectivistic, and if the wheat farmers become more individualistic pretty quickly, then that does kind of speak against the idea that these things are, you know, long lasting, even if you can acquire them quickly.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting point. I think the data might speak a little bit to that because they definitely are less collectivistic. I mean, if you believe the data, but the way that the paper frames it is the rice farmers became more collectivistic, and that's what's sticking around even after they're done. Yeah. So like you said, the Chinese Communist Party essentially randomly assigned a group of people after the war to start wheat or rice farms. And like crucially, these were people who were seemingly selected at random. It's not like they selected people who had experience in rice farms or wheat farms. They didn't select based on how old or young you were or any demographic characteristic. It seemed like there was no concern about who was being put into one or the other group. And the regions that they were assigned to start these farms were really close together, meaning that you could equate like a whole bunch of other environmental variables.
Yeah.
They were only like 50 kilometers apart. And the only real difference was that in some areas you couldn't farm rice because the land was too high above the river and you can't like get the water from the river up to that elevation. So you have this like rare instance where you can get this quasi-random assignment to these two different conditions. And this happened in the 50s. Like It's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I don't know I don't know who first figured out that this would be a way to test this hypothesis, but that's like half of the work right there is like, oh shit.
It's a great idea. Yeah. It's like a natural experiment, all the problems about all the different, I will have a couple of complaints about methodology here, but all the complaints about, oh no, it's in a laboratory environment. And so that corrupts it in some way, skews it. You can't generalize. Like that's not an issue here. And yet you still have the pretty clean control condition and manipulation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So 70 years after this started, these researchers went in and gave measures of collectivism/individualism. And they demonstrated that, it appears after 70 years, like you were saying, a pretty short time, that these cultures have already emerged. And like, it's not just like the year that you're rice farming, you get into that mode, right? That like cognitive mode. Like even when people, the rice farms, it turns out like got rotated out and people still, even if they weren't currently rice farming, were more likely to have this collectivist way of thinking.
Yeah. And the thinking behind that is just that you just need more cooperation as a white farmer. It sounds like a wheat farmer, like you're fucking kicking up your legs and living is easy.
Right. Totally.
But rice farming requires that you actually like deal with other people, cooperate to some degree.
The question of like where cultures come from just in general is super fucking interesting, right? And like I don't remember thinking about it that much growing up when you're just like, so why? Because you're introduced to different cultures quite a bit. Yeah. Right. I guess depending, like we travel out, there's like completely different people. And it just doesn't seem like a natural thing. It never was like a natural thing for me to say, so why are like Brazilians so much nicer, even though I don't think they're genetically that much different from the Germans that birthed them?
Yeah, no, I know. Like in some ways, it's like the most unsurprising outcome, which is, of course, like people in warmer weather cities are like more relaxed and more cheerful and more hospitable and friendly than people in cold weather. It's not surprising. Like if it's freezing most of the time and you're shut in your house, that you will be a little less like social than if you're always outside, and that's been ingrained into your culture. And so like, it's not surprising. And yet you're right. We don't ask why or how very often. And we don't look into the details very often. One of the stuff that's really cool about the honor culture research is the extent to which they really dug into the details and, like then found similar kind of environmental factors, maybe in like mafia families and some inner city environments where like showing signs of weakness can be really destructive for you and bad for your family. So like there's all sorts of ways in which that research kind of highlights this stuff. But what's cool about this is from an outsider non-farming perspective, like you just wouldn't think wheat farming or rice farming would have big a difference. But according to this.
So one of the proposed explanations that the author brings up in his first paper is that there's this theory of pathogen prevalence that argues that in places with higher levels of disease, like pathogens that promote disease, that made it people more wary of strangers and made those cultures more insular and collectivistic. And they point out that while you see this as a correlation, pathogens are also strongly correlated with heat, and rice grows in hot areas. So, you never know what the actual reason might be. Yeah. We can observe these correlations.
So that would mean they should be more concerned about pathogens in the, but they're still not.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's still, so you still need cooperation, even if you're risking.
Right.
Yeah.
But you would be interdependent in a more insular community and still wary of strangers. I think that's what you're saying. Yeah. You were going to transition to something then.
Well, I was going to transition into the way they're measures, right?
Yeah, okay.
And there's one thing that, if I have a complaint about this, it's that they really chose these measures that I'm question their validity, and I question also their rationale to the point where I think there might be a typo. So here's what they say. This is on page 8 of the PDF. To measure cultural differences, we chose tests based on 2 criteria. First, we chose measures that previous research has linked rice-wheat differences and larger east-west differences. We did this because it allows us to know whether the cultural differences between rice and wheat farms are similar to larger east-west cultural differences established through decades of research. Okay, fine. Second, we chose implicit and non-self-report measures. This helps us avoid the documented problems of using self-report surveys to measure cultural differences. Meta-analyses have found that self-report scales fail to find East-West differences in collectivism. One meta-analysis of self-report studies found that people in Japan are more collectivistic than people in the U.S.
Yeah.
Wait, what? Is that a typo?
No, I think so. I noted the same exact thing, and the title of the paper doesn't say, but I'm pretty
that
sure.
Wouldn't be disqualifying to find Japanese participants more collectivistic than U.S. participants. That would be in line with what you would expect.
Yeah. That's why I think it's the opposite.
So,
I think it's a typo.
It might be the opposite. There is evidence that self-report collectivism is correlated with non-self-report measures in the wrong direction, even within a single country. But why are you privileging the non-self-report measures and the normal survey studies, which, I got fairly familiar with, just because maybe it's them that are wrong. I mean, on the surface, you might think, the fact what words you match up to each other doesn't tell you that much about how collectivistic you really are, because that's one of their measures is do you put the rabbit with the carrot or do you put it with the cat, in a more oppositional way? And it's hey, I don't know. Certainly nothing in their justification for using these implicit measures even made sense. Never mind seems compelling, even if that was a typo and they just meant to reverse it.
Yeah, so I agree with you that their disparaging of the self-report stuff seems weird, given that surely is how we found this difference. But it may not be. And I think that their use of the term implicit is just wrong here.
I mean, it's pretty implicit. The word matching task is pretty implicit.
Well, it's maybe not a direct measure of collectivism, but it is a direct measure of holistic thinking, relational thinking. Just because you don't know what the hypothesis is doesn't make it implicit, right?
I guess.
Yeah, see, I think they're just using a measure of something that's correlated with collectivism.
But how do they know that it's correlated? Not based on its correlation with self-report studies, apparently, because they disparage those.
Right.
So how?
I feel like it has to be because of its correlation with other measures of collectivism, Yeah. Yeah, I had the same issue, right? It's the primacy of what they're calling implicit measures feels weird. Yeah, well, let's talk about the measures because I don't think that these are implicit measures. So one of these measures is what you're referring to. It's the measure of cultural thought style. So this is a measure of basically a difference between the kind of thinking that is relational versus the kind that's categorical. So people are given three things and they're supposed to pair the two that are like each other. So the example that you mentioned earlier, you're given the word or the picture, carrot, rabbit, and cat. And the idea is that if you pair things because of their relation to each other, right? In this case, the rabbit with the carrot, that's a different mode of thinking than if you pair the rabbit with the cat because they're both mammals and they belong to the same category, or they're both animals, for instance. And this is the difference in this kind of thinking has been shown in East and West. So people in the East are more likely to have that kind of relational style than people in the West. So I think they just took this as okay, this measure has been used as an East-West difference before.
So we're going to just do that one. Yeah, so, which is fine. That's fair enough. It's just so has the self-report ones. And based on one meta-analysis.
I know that says it's opposite in Japan. Yeah. It does seem weird. Yeah. It does seem weird. I don't like that this isn't a pre-registered study. And this is a case where pre-registration would matter to me because if they did, I'm not accusing them of being dishonest, but this is just the kinds of practices that people used to do. You can imagine that they asked explicitly and it didn't quite work out. And so they don't report it.
And so they came up with a reason why we don't have to report those measures. So again, not saying they're doing it, but their explanation for why they're not including it doesn't make sense. Makes no sense. So anyway, it's kind of interesting, but it does boil down to whether that is a valid measure and why they think it's a valid measure. But to be fair, they also have a couple other ones too.
Yeah. And again, these are sort of indirect in the sense that they're not directly just about collectivism necessarily. They're about what's supposed to be components of collectivism. Mm-hmm. So another one that they have is this measure of what you might call loyalty or you might call nepotism. And that is you present people with scenarios where you just ask them, imagine that you engage in a business deal with a friend or a stranger, and that person lied to you, and that lie actually made you lose money. Would you be willing to pay some money of your own to punish them by removing money from their account? So like, would you be willing to put up your own money to punish them? Or would you be willing to reward them for having like brought in this deal and been honest about it? So everybody gets 4 versions of this, right? You either enter a business with a friend or with a stranger, and then that person is either honest with you or they lie. And then you're asked, how much do you reward the honest person and how much would you punish the dishonest person, the one who lied? And as a measure of loyalty or nepotism, you just essentially look at how much more people play favorites with their friends, punish them less and reward them more compared to a stranger. If you're being like completely equal about strangers and friends, exactly impartial in the truest sense, then those numbers should all be pretty similar to each other. But if there's a big difference in that you're rewarding your friend more, this is loyalty. And presumably collectivistic cultures are more likely to engage in that kind of loyalty or nepotism. That's another part that I find interesting, where it's like saying it's a value judgment, whether you call it loyalty or nepotism.
Yeah. And, it's not like people in Western cultures don't practice nepotism. So you could individually have problems with all of these measures, especially because it has to be an extremely sensitive instrument in this case to demonstrate differences between otherwise kind of culturally similar people. So yeah. Pre-registration, you're right. This is a clear case where that would have been hugely helpful.
Yeah. Now, in their defense, this measure has been shown to distinguish between, I think this is the one where Singapore versus US, you give people this measure and you get a clear difference in how much, just like dollar value of how much they show favoritism to their friends versus strangers.
Yeah. Like what?
It's like a $25 difference.
Yeah.
Like,
no. I mean, it's just a question of whether that is supposed to generalize to some kind of real cultural norm or not. There could be a lot of reasons why people in Singapore might give more money to like somebody that they knew or reward someone unfairly, and Americans don't. That don't necessarily have to do with how deeply ingrained the culture is. So saying that this is going to, in a more fine-grained context, capture something of the differences between two neighboring communities, like it's a little bit a leap of faith.
Well, I mean, I didn't mean to imply that it had only ever been tested in Singapore versus the US.
No, I know but you know what I mean. Like
I do, but I think that it might be taken care of as an objection if you've reliably shown it in Japan and China and compared it to US and Canada like regularly. You would at least be willing to say that there's something that is causing this difference. And if that something can be found in this sample, then the question would be, so like, why is it found here and in all of those other things, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Withdrawn.
Now, speaking of drawn, this other one is interesting.
Oh, yeah.
This is the measure of
this one
of self. Yeah,
like,
this one.
This seems like fatty. You know what I mean?
It seems like a fad though from the 60s. It seems like
it seems like
a projective test of sorts.
Yeah.
It's this test of self-inflation, or what they call an implicit test of individualism. And what you're asked to do is you're just said, okay, we're going to ask you to draw a basic network of you and your family and like the relations. So draw circles and lines. Make one of those circles represent you, and the lines are the relationship that you have, and the other circles represent other people. And now what they do, so those are simple drawings of circles. And what they do is they measure the circumference of the circle that you drew representing yourself and compare it to the average size of the circles you drew for other people.
Yeah.
Now, if this works, if this is it'd be pretty cool. Like if it's really measuring,
you just give it to like, your fiance,
draw my penis and draw the penises of other men that you've slept with.
So this one is like, I think I have used this research in my own work because there's a chapter in Relative Justice where we talked about like the sense of self and how in collectivist cultures, the self was considered more integrated with their community. And in an individualist culture, the self was considered more atomistic and with less influence and a less porous boundary between, the idea was in individualistic cultures, the thing that separates you is your skin from other people. And that's a lot more porous in collectivist cultures. And I think they used versions of this kind of exercise to determine like exactly how porous your sense of self was. And yeah, I mean, like, again, it wouldn't surprise me if this correlated in some ways with some interesting different cultural differences on the self, which I think there clearly are. It's just like, this was research that I was looking at that was from like the 80s, like 70s and 80s and, like the circle stuff. So I don't know to what extent.
It reminds me of these projective tests that are like this one called House Tree Person, where you ask people to draw a house, a tree, and the person. And then you see how big they drew the self. Like the person is supposed to represent yourself. How big are you in relation to the house? Like, but they measured it down to the millimeter.
Yeah.
And so what you get is this metric that is, what's the average difference in size between your circle and the average other circles you drew. And yeah, like you get these results where rice farmers, they draw themselves closer in size to the other family members than wheat farmers.
Wheat farmers are just like the fat cat, like the Monopoly guy with his cigar.
Or like I was just thinking like the guy in a leather jacket who's a loner and
Christian Slater and Heathers.
Yeah, or just James Dean or one of these. The man with no name.
Yeah. Oh, he was from a wheat farming. You can tell if you watch the Man with No Name trilogy, like clear wheat farmer descendant there. No, it is funny. Like, I believe that this kind of explanation is true and illuminating.
Yeah,
and so
feels right.
I want these to be right, I do, like, I can't deny that I have some skepticism regarding some of these measures in the way they're used to gauge this kind of, like really just these Chinese, like what are they thinking about getting that put in front of them? They're just from these regions that was once assigned to be wheat and rice farmers. But like, great. I like these kinds of studies because I totally buy the ultimate kind of spiritual point that they're making.
Right. Yeah, no. I think I would have used different measures. One answer to why they used these is because like in the 2014 paper that he did, I think these are the ones that he used. So he wanted to like use the same measure that he used in the more large scale study. But I would have also included, I don't know, something else. I would have at least reported an explicit, like, how much do you value, your family and friends or whatever, I don't know, something. Like, because if you show that it's not related, that's interesting. If you show that it is related, that's just further evidence for you.
Yeah. Like, I wonder, like, give this guy sodium pentothal and it's like, did you run explicit measures? Just be honest,
Right.
No, but like, I agree that they should have either way. And what you definitely shouldn't have done is say, well, we can't trust self-report measures because they show that Japanese participants are more collectivistic than United States participants. It's like, no, those sound pretty solid, based on what we know.
I would put money on that. That's a typo, and that what they meant to say was there's this weird meta-analysis on straight up self-report. Japanese people report being more individualistic.
Right.
And that can't be right.
Yeah, but again, even saying that is like, well, it could be like, like a lot has changed since.
A lot has changed, exactly.
But once again, we are the real data colada. We find mistakes in papers and we demand a retraction.
I mean, not even Nature Communications spotted what we did.
Unbelievable.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the magnitude of these, because if you look on page 5, they graph these very pretty graphs of the main findings across these 3 measures. They're nice graphs because they're not only bar graphs that show standard error of the mean. Yeah, well, standard error of the mean, which is a little different, but that allows you to kind of eyeball whether these are significantly different. if those lines don't overlap. But they also show you kind of the distribution. So you can see that there's a lot of noise. People are answering sort of across the board. Like, you couldn't just eyeball the data and see that there was a clear difference before tallying it up. And the differences actually are a lot smaller than I thought they would be, given just looking at the graphs and hearing the description. I wrote down what these differences were. Okay, so this one was, I think, the clearest one. So wheat farmers treat friends and strangers much more similarly. Like when you look at that, it's almost like in the aggregate, they're not really distinguishing between friends and strangers when they reward or punish them.
If anything,
whereas the rice farmers are
more.
Yeah, exactly. The other ones, like the self-inflation one, where they measured the difference in the sizes of your circle versus the people you draw. It's a difference of like between slightly more than 1 millimeter for the rice farmers and slightly more than 3 millimeters for the wheat farmers. Like I didn't sit and measure like what this difference would look like, because I'm not a monster who uses the metric system anyway, so I wouldn't know how to do this. And then the relational categorization one. So now this is the one where you're asked essentially you're given 10 sets of 3 words and you're asked which of the words go together. And there's a relational answer and there's a categorical answer. Americans are more likely to give the categorical answer. East Asians are more likely to give the relational answer. So what this is showing is percent of the answers that were relational out of those 10. And one of the things they noted was this was the highest across the board, the highest relational answer group that they've measured. So rice and wheat farmers. But the difference is like between what I can eyeball, because I couldn't find the actual numbers, something like 87%
84
of the rice farmers to 84% of the wheat farmer.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
Answers.
Yeah, that's like, that's nothing. Like
that's nothing, right? And so when you translate all of these into effect sizes, they're all right around the same range, like 0.15 to 0.19. If that means anything to you, that's a pretty small effect.
Even for the loyalty nepotism one.
Yeah, those are the higher ones, right? Like in the 0.18, 0.19.
Because the graph, that one looks dramatic.
Yeah, I know, right? Like it looks... But that's about the size of the effect that I get or like the Yoel and I get when we look at the relationship between discuss sensitivity and political orientation, right? It's about that. And I always try to remind people that that's like a really small slice of the pie. Like it's theoretically interesting. And it certainly is here theoretically interesting because these are people who've only been divided for 70 years who are showing presumably, ostensibly cultural differences. But it's not like all of a sudden you've turned people into like this Sicilian
like perfect communist
mafia
flavor.
versus exactly. Yeah, and I didn't see them talk too much about the fact that they're kind of small. Yeah, I buy it. I'm with you in spirit. This seems right, and I wouldn't expect it. Honestly, if the effects were huge, I would be much more suspicious of the researchers. These are reliable but small effects. It's interesting that you get them so clearly and essentially the same people in the same environment randomly assigned to one versus the other, but it is what it is. But I like it. I'm a fan of this explanation.
Me too. And let's end on that note. We're fans. We don't buy the measures maybe, but we buy the thinking behind it.
And the coolness of the thought to be like, hey, let's look at this in these people.
Using accidents of nature that then otherwise, that's why I really don't like the implicit measures. It's because you have something that's so perfect, like that feels very valid, in terms of what you're studying. And then you put in these measures that it's really hard to know what to make of them. You have to connect a lot of other dots.
I would love for them to go in and actually interview
talk to them.
People.
Exactly.
Yeah, and see whether you can see these differences emerges. Now, for something like cognitive, the categorization task, maybe you can't. Maybe that's the only way to get at like those differences in cognition. But still, like presumably you're interested in collectivism, and those cognitive tasks like holistic versus analytic thinking are just like one subset of what's going on.
And could have to do with
Yeah.
the kind of calculations you have to make as a rice
Yeah.
farmer versus the wheat farmer, or, like
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So who knows? I just think, like this is where if you pair this with a good ethnographic approach as well, and so you have these kind of complementary approaches working together, it would be a lot more compelling.
Yeah.
Yeah. The pioneering work of Joe Henrich, I think, on some of this stuff is really good because it also does incorporate more qualitative analyses as well.
Yeah. I looked up the original paper in 2014 where they documented this rice theory. And Joe Henrich was actually asked to give his perspective on it in that same volume in Science. And he seemed on board with it. And that to me, was if Joe Henrich co-signs the findings, doesn't mean they're right, but it means that there was nothing
There's something to take seriously here.
glaring. Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
It sounds like we should all try to be wheat farmers. It's the easy life.
I'm eating Chinese food tonight, and I wonder if that's just going to make me
More individual.
more collectivistic. Collectivist. I'm endorsing.
Well, it depends what you're having. Are you having rice?
It's a good question. I'm having fried rice, and my wife is having noodles, and I think that says something deeply true about
your...
our fucking individualistic wife.
Now you know why.
Yeah, they're not rice noodles. They're not rice noodles.
It's not her fault. It's like Rapey Ricardo.
Could we title the episode Rapey Ricardo?
All right.
Lucy, bend over.
Join us next time on Very Bad Wizards.
The great boss has spoken. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Who are you? Who are you? A very bad man.
I'm a very good man. Good man. They think deep thoughts, and with no more brains than you have. Pay no attention to that man. Anybody can have a brain.
You're a very bad man.
I'm a very good man. Just a very bad wizard.